Hello guys and welcome back to another FPL video. My name is FPL Meerkat and today I've got my Game Week 28 free hit guide for you guys. I'm going to be doing a complete deep dive into the free hit, whether you should free hit or not, and a deep dive into every single position on the field, what I believe to be the best options for each position, and some fixtures that you could think about focusing on your free hit. I know a few of you are considering using the free hit. Maybe people who haven't been too engaged with FPL content have now seen that there's suddenly a ton of blanks, but fear not, I've got this video for you to basically discuss the complications caused by the free hit and who I think the best picks are for you on the free hit. So let's get straight into things. So just before I go into the players, I just wanted to have a talk about the fixtures themselves. So going through one by one, Newcastle, Nottingham Forest, that's a very interesting one for Newcastle. Newcastle obviously been a very solid defence as of late. They've conceded a few goals here and there, but Nottingham Forest do have a very good track record at home, so that could be an interesting one there. Aston Villa, Bournemouth away, Bournemouth at home, sorry, is probably one of the best fixtures on paper for Villa, so definitely a team you'd like to target there, but again, Bournemouth have been quite a handle to deal with this season in the Premier League. The reason why I find the free hit very fun this season is because there's no easy team to beat, is there? As we've just seen with Bournemouth beating Liverpool 1-0. No teams really, you never really know what's going to predict. You never look at a fixture and go, that's definitively going to be the outcome. There is so much randomness that's been going on this season. Brentford-Leicester, that could be quite a close one. Brentford have a very good record at home, but Leicester could cause some upsets there. They've been very leaky at the back though, so I expect quite a few goals in that game from the Brentford side. Southampton-Spurs, again, Spurs a little bit off it as of late. They did well in Game Week 27, but Southampton have been a very solid defence recently as well, which we'll get into. So again, not an amazing fixture to focus on for Spurs, considering as they're away as well. Wolves-Leeds, probably the most evenly matched fixture there. Again, could be an absolute riot for one of these teams. I wouldn't mind going for one player in that fixture, but definitely not one to focus on too heavily. Chelsea-Everton, again, Chelsea's defence has been very good as of recent. Again, a good team to focus on. Everton, maybe not so much, probably one of the worst on paper there. And then speaking of which, Arsenal Crystal Palace, the last fixture of the free hit, I think is probably the best fixture to focus on there. Arsenal have been an incredibly good attack as of recent. Crystal Palace I don't think they've actually won this year yet. So yeah, they're miles off it at the moment. But something to really talk about in this free hit is that out of the 5 best attacks in the league this season, 4 of them aren't playing. The only one that is playing is Arsenal, but Brighton, Man United, Man City and Liverpool all aren't playing in this game week. So yeah, it's very difficult to try and focus on a lot of the teams here. And it's certainly got the potential to make your team look incredibly different to what a lot of people will have when if they're not free hitting. But yeah, that's the fixtures. Let's get into the goalkeepers first of all. So I've gone away and made this graphic. The data, as you can see on the table here, has been taken from Fantasy Football Hub. Game weeks 18 to 27, giving it a 10 game week period to just get some really reliable data there. And it's per 90 minutes as well, because obviously for the goalkeepers, it didn't really make a difference because they've been playing 90 minutes each game. But yeah, for some of the later ones coming up, the stats will look a bit, maybe not what you expect. But yeah, so I've given here the price, the expected goals for the team they play for, how good their fixture is, the opponent's expected goals, so basically how likely are the team to get a clean sheet here, the saves per match that the goalkeeper produces, and then my marking on whether how good of a pick they are. So I've given 4 ratings, either essential, you need to have them in your team, solid picks, viable picks, as in you can go for them. I think they're all right picks, and caution. So just maybe steering clear of them, but yeah, just be cautious picking them. So for the goalkeepers, there's not really much to talk about apart from the 4 defenses I think that are pretty good picks for this game week are Arsenal, Chelsea, Newcastle, and Aston Villa, as you can see there. And looking at the data there, obviously Pope with a team expected goals of 0.9 there is the standout. The Newcastle defence has been excellent this season. Although I would be a bit cautious of Pope as well. He did obviously get sent off for handling the ball, and he very nearly got sent off in the Wolves game. If anyone was watching that, I think he tripped up Jimenez as he was through on goal. Maybe should have been a red card there as well. So yeah, Pope's been a bit suspect as of recent. And as you can see there, 1.4 saves per match. He really is not making many saves at all in the last 10 game weeks. And as you can see there, the best of both worlds. I think the best two here are Ramsdale and Kepa, the best of both worlds. The team's expected goals conceded are low. The expected goals of the opponent is also low, and they have a relatively good amount of saves. And as you can see there, it's quite close to 3 being that magic number to get you an extra save, to get you an extra point for saves. But going down the list there, Raya is also a solid pick with just how many saves he makes, 4.2, incredibly high amount of saves. But the Brighton defence has not been excellent. They've been they've obviously done incredibly well this season, but they've been a bit of a mixed bag in terms of their performances. The expected goals of Leicester as well is the highest in the list there. Leicester are a good attack. They're a pretty ropey defence, but yeah, their attack is still relatively solid. So I think that Brentford will concede in that game. But again, he's a nice choice there. And Sarr as well is a very interesting one if you think that Wolves are going to keep a clean sheet at home to Leeds. Again, Leeds' expected goals has not been that great, 1.1 as you can see there. And Sarr's been making a lot of saves. I think he's actually one of the highest scoring goalkeepers and has really been going under the radar. The Wolves' defence can be solid at times, but it's been a bit shaky this season. And Forster, again, a really cheap option. I think he can definitely be your bench keeper for the game week. Again, the Southampton game, Southampton's attack has not been great. 1 expected goals per 90. But yeah, and then a relatively good amount of saves for Forster there. But obviously his data set is a bit smaller because he's only just recently come into the team. But yeah, I think the top 2 picks here are definitively Ramsdale and Kepa. It just depends how much you want to focus on those defences. Again, Martinez is actually not as good of a pick as I realised. I've still put him in the solid category just because of how weak Bournemouth's attack is. Again, they can score, as we saw against Liverpool. But yeah, the expected goals of Aston Villa is actually the second highest. The only team that has a higher expected goals conceded is Bournemouth themselves. So on paper, that Bournemouth Aston Villa game should be very interesting given how low the expected goals of Bournemouth are, but also how high the expected goals conceded of Aston Villa and Bournemouth are in that game. But yeah, I think my 2 picks here would be one of Ramsdale or Kepa to look on the free hit. But yeah, there's not a lot to talk about with the goalkeepers. Let's move on to the defenders. So, as you can see here with the top assets of the defenders, I'm going to split these next 3, the defenders, midfielders and forwards into top assets and differentials. So the top assets for defenders, I think there are 2 essential picks here for the free hit, Trippier and Chilwell. I know they're more on the more expensive side for defenders, but I'm going to be honest, it's very hard to try and spend all of the budget in a free hit when I think there's only 2 premiums playing in this game week. Again, Arsenal have no premium assets at all. They were massively underpriced this season. So yeah, I think you can get a great set of picks over the entire team. But yeah, Trippier and Chilwell definitely the standout picks. Trippier there as well. An insane expected assist stat. That is incredible, isn't it? 0.64 expected assists is absolutely insane. He's basically predicted to get 2 assists every 3 game weeks. So yeah, he got another assist last night as well. And the fact he's on free kicks as well, he's just so... He's very good at them, isn't he? He nearly scored a couple, but again, the expected goals, that is pretty much solely from free kicks. So you're just hoping he gets some free kicks. But yeah, Trippier, an absolute set. Newcastle, one of the best defences in the league. Nottingham Forest, one of the worst attacks. I know it's away from home. That's probably the only caveat there. But yeah, I think Trippier is almost locked on in every single free hit. He is such an incredibly good asset. There might even be a shout to captain him in the game week. But yeah, certainly go for Trippier. And Chilwell as well, I think, is also an essential asset. As of recently, he's really found his spot in the Chelsea team. Again, Chelsea's defence has been very good. The expected goals of Everton haven't been great. They're some of the highest on the list here. But yeah, 1.2 is still not massive. And he's putting up some great stats in terms of expected goals and assists. He did manage to grab a goal at the weekend as well. So yeah, he's probably in high form. And yeah, I think you need to have one of the Chelsea defenders in there. And I think Chilwell is definitely the best pick out of them. Zinchenko and Gabriel, I think, are the top two Arsenal assets to cover an Arsenal defender if you're not going for Ramsdale or you're looking for a double up. It's pretty difficult to split them, to be honest. Gabriel obviously has that massive threat from corners, as we saw last weekend, scoring a goal, and Zinchenko does also have goal threat from getting forward incredibly often. He actually occupies, I think I saw a statistic that he occupies the most space out of any player when it comes to the position just outside the box on the left-hand side. He actually covers that space the most frequently out of any player, which is absolutely insane given he is a defender. He gets very, very advanced. So I really like Zinchenko as a pick. I think I do prefer him over Gabriel, but Gabriel's just scored from a corner and we all knew he had that threat from corners. So yeah, I think he's also an incredibly, incredibly solid pick. Fabian Schär as well makes it there. I've ranked him. So this is from best to worst, basically, in my opinion. Fabian Schär, also an incredibly solid pick. I think he's probably a better pick than Pope if you want to double up on the Newcastle defence. Again, the stats there, Newcastle's defence has been incredibly good this season. But look at his XG of 0.28, an incredibly high XG. And again, this is the last 10 game weeks. I know that he scored his goals at the beginning of the season, but he's been getting in some great positions, taking on some very good shots, expected to score a goal every 4 games, which is quite impressive there, and still a high expected assist as well. I really like Schär as a pick. I think he is likely, he's one of the more likely ones to get you a goal, and I don't think many people own him. So if you want to go for the double up in Newcastle defence, I think Trippier and Schär is a great shout. But again, Trippier is definitely your go-to if you want a Newcastle defender. James as well is a doubt for the game week. I know he was ill, and I think that Chilwell's been putting up better stats. I think Chilwell is a definitively better pick than Reece James. I know there was a press conference recently where Graham Potter said the penalties will either be taken by Reece James or Havertz. I think Havertz is going to be taking them 90% of the time. I think it's a very small chance. I think the only chance that James takes a penalty is if Havertz gets subbed off early. And then James is still on the pitch and he's the only one to take a penalty there. So yeah, it's a nice little thing to add in there. But again, obviously it would make his XG go through the roof, wouldn't it, if he had penalties or if he managed to get a penalty. But yeah, I think Chilwell is definitively a better pick than James just given the uncertainties about James, and also Chilwell's putting up some great stats and looks to be in fantastic form at the moment. And I've put Moreno as well, Alex Moreno from Aston Villa. Again, I think Aston Villa are probably the 4th best defence to focus on in this game week, even though the great fixture against Bournemouth, Aston Villa's defence has not been the most solid. But if they do keep a clean sheet, I think Moreno's got the best potential to get an attacking return as well. As you can see, they're 0.16 assist threat there, expected assists. I think he did get an assist in the last game week. So yeah, he does seem to get in very advanced positions. I think he will play in that Bournemouth game as well. There's a little bit, I think, is it Young that can come back into the side over Moreno, or is it Digne? I think one of them could potentially come in there. But yeah, I think Moreno is a very, very solid pick and a nice, kind of a bit of a differential as well, I'd say. But I'd say these others are definitively better. I think if you're going to go for a back three, I think the most likely triple up is Trippier, Chilwell and Zinchenko. Gabriel as well, a nice differential, and then Schär and James, good alternatives. But Moreno is a nice differential pick as well. But speaking of differentials, here are the differential picks for the free hit. So I've put Porro there at the top of the list. I've basically tried to focus on all of the defenses. Again, you can rotate between some of the defenses in this list. But yeah, Porro, I think he's a viable pick. I think the fixture against Southampton is pretty decent. Expected goals for Southampton is only 1, and the expected goals of Spurs is conceded of Spurs is very low. And again, he's putting up some good stats in terms of expected goals and assists there. Ayling is a very surprising pick. I was going to put Firpo at this spot, but looking at the statistics, Ayling's much more likely to get an attacking return than Firpo. I know Firpo's got one recently, but I think that was very much a one-off. And obviously the expected goals of Wolves is, I believe, the lowest out of any team in the Premier League over the last 10 game weeks. So yeah, even though you might think that Leeds' defence is a bit shaky, I think that game will be relatively low scoring. So you can take a punt, I think, on a Leeds defender there. And I think Ayling would be the top asset to go for to try and get you an attacking return. Wobber or Wober, however you pronounce his name, I think is also a good pick. I put Henry there as well because I think a lot of people who who have wildcarded previously and aren't free hitting will have Henry in their teams. And again, he's putting up some good stats. I think he's the best pick out of the Brighton defenders. I know that Pinnock has recently got a goal, but yeah, I think Henry is definitely putting up the best stats there as well. I think he's a viable pick. If you're going to go for the Wolves defense, I think Dawson is probably your best pick. Offers that attacking potential from corners and set pieces, a very low expected assist there. But yeah, if you think that Wolves going to get a clean sheet, he might get you some bonus. Again, Dawson could be one of those players that gets 15 points, gets a goal, gets free bonus, gets a clean sheet, but he could also, get 1 or 2 if Leeds decide to score at all. Walker Peters as well, putting up some very good stats. I know Walker Peters has been an incredibly good pick as of previous FPL seasons. And something incredibly surprising there is the expected goals conceded from Southampton. Their defence has been extremely good as of recent. 1.1 there is incredibly low. I was not expecting Southampton's defence to be that solid recently. They're not really letting up a lot of goals. They're just not scoring many. And the expected goals of Spurs is actually quite low. So yeah, I mean, if you think that Southampton could somehow get a clean sheet, they just kept a clean sheet to Man United as well. Again, they had a red card early on in the game, but that could potentially happen in the Spurs game. And I think Southampton, they have potential to get a clean sheet here. So yeah, I think Walker Peters is definitely a viable option. I think he's the best pick out of the Southampton defence. Again, Perot is also a good pick. But I think he's a bit more prone to rotation, although I think he's probably been a better player this season. If you, for some reason, want to go for a Bournemouth defender, Zamora, I think, is a good pick. Again, they just kept a clean sheet to Liverpool, so anything can happen in this game, and I think that's what the free hit is about, just taking some outlandish risks there. And Zamora's putting up some good stats in terms of expected assists. He's actually the highest in the differentials I've put here. So I think he's a very viable option to get you potentially a clean sheet and an assist. And then Tarkowski, I thought I'd throw in an Everton defender there, but I would really steer clear of the Everton defence as well as the Crystal Palace defence for this one. I think Chelsea away, very unlikely they keep a clean sheet in this one. Again, they have just kept a clean sheet to Brentford, but yeah, I think it's quite unlikely away from home that they will keep a clean sheet in this one. The expected goals conceded of Everton is pretty high as well. And Tarkowski, surprisingly, has the same expected goals and assists, despite the fact you would think he's a lot more likely to score a goal, wouldn't you, from a set piece? But yeah, I would stay clear of the Everton defence for this one. But yeah, these are the top differential picks if you just want to go a little bit different on your free hit. And now moving on to the midfielders. So moving on to the midfielders, and this is certainly very interesting looking into the stats. I've only put one essential midfielder. I think Saka has to be essential on the free hit. Looking at the stats is a bit interesting because he's not actually the highest over the last 10 game weeks per 90 minutes out of the midfielders here. But yeah, I think Saka is essential. I think he's nailed on to play that game. He's obviously on penalties. He's just so many ways of getting points. The only caveat I do have is that he's been playing very wide as of recent. So I'm not too sure how likely he is in terms of a goal threat. I think that's been boosted by the penalties. But in terms of assists, he's pretty good. But I would say he's essential just because of how well he's been playing this season. I think if you go without him on the free hit and he does well, it's going to really sting because he's very highly owned. In terms of another Arsenal midfielder to own, though, I think it's a very interesting choice here. I've currently put Martinelli as the second pick here. His goal threat is just so high at the moment. I know people were worried about him not potentially playing games, But with the current injury to Nketiah, Martinelli has been playing very frequently and has been very direct as well. As you can see, his goal threat is actually the highest out of the Arsenal midfielders there, and I think he's the highest out of all midfielders playing in the game week. So yeah, I think he's an incredibly solid pick there. Trossard is someone who I'm really keeping my eye on. He's an incredibly nice differential if you think he's going to play. The expected goals is a bit lower than the rest, but the expected assist is massive. And as we saw, it came to fruition with the 3 assists he got in game week 27. So yeah, I think he's an incredibly cool differential to go for. I think he's big potential to get points. And Ødegaard, I genuinely think, is the worst of the Arsenal midfielders there. I think he's got the lowest potential to get a massive haul. He scores goals every now and then, but he's very good for the bonus points. But looking at the expected goals and the assists there for the last 10 game weeks, he is distinctly the lowest out of the 4 there. And obviously the arrival of Jesus back into the side puts the minutes into doubt. I think Ødegaard and Saka, we know, are definitely nailed in that side. Obviously, there's Smith Rowe and Nelson who could come in as well, but obviously Arsenal have an incredibly good chance to win the league here, and I think they're going to go all out in every single fixture. So yeah, I think there's a lot of different picks you could go for in here. I personally like Saka and Martinelli. I think Trossard is an incredibly cool differential over those two as well, and he's going to be very lowly owned as well. I think it's even viable to go for a triple up in the Arsenal midfield here, because there's not that many great options in the midfield. And I think most people will have 2 Arsenal midfielders anyway, so it might be nice to just have a variety in your team, basically. But yeah, I think any of the 4 are great picks, and I think they will all play due to the fact that Jesus only just come back from injury. I think he'll probably be benched for the Crystal Palace fixture, and I think all 4 of those Arsenal midfielders will start. So it's just how many tickets you want to buy for this lottery. I've put Maddison here as well. Maddison, I think, is a very, very solid pick on a free hit. The away fixture to Brentford isn't the best on paper. Oh, just to go over the Arsenal stats as well. Obviously, their expected goals is some of the highest in the league, and the expected goals conceded of Crystal Palace, I believe, is the 3rd highest. So yeah, on paper, an incredibly, incredibly good fixture to focus on. But going on to Maddison, the expected goals of Leicester aren't the highest, and the expected goals conceded of Brentford are pretty high as well. 1.4, relatively high. But Maddison's stats have been incredibly good. As you can see, they're pretty high expected goals at 0.29 and then 0.37 expected assists. He's absolutely the main man in that Leicester attack. So yeah, I think he's a very solid pick to go for. Son is a viable differential, I think. Obviously, one of the most expensive players you can get on the free hit. And he's just someone who is interesting because he just has the potential to go massive, doesn't he? We know that he can really rake in the points. He did get a goal as well in game week 27. So hopefully his confidence is back up to is high again. But yeah, the expected goals and the expected assists aren't massive for Son. He's been far off it this season, but again, he has scored a hat-trick in one game. So yeah, he could be an interesting differential. I'm not too sure whether I'll go for him myself, but yeah, he's certainly a viable option there. I wouldn't quite put him in the solid category. And then Almiron I've put on the list as well. Cheap. The Nottingham Forest fixture is very good. He was benched for the Wolves game. He did come on and score though. I do expect him to start the game against Nottingham Forest. But yeah, his stats have been very, very low as of recent. I've only put him on a viable because the fixture is good, but Newcastle as of recent haven't been the highest scoring team, but they do have had a higher XG of 1.7, one of the highest in the league. So yeah, I think Almiron is also a very, very solid pick. But moving on to the differentials, now it's quite difficult to pick out the differentials here because there's not many standout options for the free hit. So I've included as many as I can. I had to remove some as well. James Ward-Prowse and Billing are 2 that I looked into, but I couldn't quite squeeze them onto the list here. Harvey Barnes has put up some incredibly good stats with 0.36 expected goals. That's similar to the Arsenal assets, the Arsenal attackers, per 90. It's just the issue is he did get benched in the last game for some reason. So it's not a guarantee that Barnes will play. I think if he does, he's a very nice differential asset, especially to the likes of Maddison. But I think if you were to go to a Leicester midfielder, it would be Maddison you'd go for. Rodrigo there, I've put a second. Again, really good stats, even though he's been injured recently, his stats have still been very good. The expected goals of Leeds have been poor as of recent. And again, this could be Harrison. Harrison's stats have actually been very low, despite the fact that he got a goal and an assist at the weekend. His expected stats have been far off it, and Rodrigo was benched in that game, in game week 27, I think, because he's just come back from injury. That's the reason why. But yeah, the Leeds midfield is a bit of a difficult one, and the Wolves defence, again, expected goals conceded is relatively high, but it's an away fixture. I don't know how sure I am of Leeds getting a goal there, but yeah, certainly viable. Bailey, obviously a player that many of us had in our teams near the start of the season. The home fixture against Bournemouth is obviously something to really focus your eyes on. The 1.9 expected goals conceded. Bailey's stats have not been great, but again, I think he's relatively nailed in that Aston Villa side. He did play well in the previous game. And yeah, the expected goals of 1.2 of Aston Villa are pretty low, so I don't know how likely I'd be to go for Bailly. And then I've decided to put Mudryk on here. Obviously, Mudryk could be Pulisic, it could be Sterling. The honest answer is we just don't know who is going to be in that front three for Chelsea at the moment. We do expect it to be Havertz and João Felix are going to both be there, but whoever the other winger is, we're not quite sure. I think Sterling has been injured as of recent, so that's why he didn't play the previous game. And Mudryk did look a bit better in that fixture that Chelsea have just had against Leicester. I think he did look quite a bit better. He has obviously a good fixture against Everton. But Mudryk's stats himself are relatively low, but again, it's just going for someone a bit different on the free hit. I think if you were to go for a Chelsea attacker, you would definitely be looking towards the forwards. But again, as we're going to get onto in a second, the forwards, there's a lot of good options there. So if you want to go on the Chelsea attack and don't want to take one of the forward options, I think Mudryk is a very viable shout. Sterling's stats have been a lot better than Mudryk's, but it's just whether he's going to play. I think Mudryk will hopefully get the nod. I put Adama there as a Wolves asset. Again, this could be Podence. He looked pretty good in Wolves' last game. But yeah, Adama, the expected goals of Wolves have been absolutely shocking. And the expected goals conceded of Leeds aren't that high. And again, his stats are more levered towards an assist there, but I still think Traore is a viable option. Gibbs White, again, he's certainly an interesting asset considering how much money Nottingham Forest spent to sign him. The fixture against not Newcastle isn't the best. Again, their goals conceded is very low, and the expected goals of Forest is pretty low too. But yeah, he's certainly got that threat from set pieces. As we've seen, he's gotten goals and assists from that kind of play as well, but I would have caution on him. And then Zaha, who I thought was an interesting shout. I just put him on the list here, not because I think he's good, but just to highlight him. The expected goals of Crystal Palace as of recent have been abysmal. Arsenal have actually got a relatively high goals conceded, all things considered, at 1.3. But it's away, and Zaha's stats, you can see there, despite being the main man at Crystal Palace, his stats have been incredibly poor there, 0.08 XG. You're just kind of hoping he gets a penalty in that, really. So yeah, I would be steering clear of any of the Crystal Palace attack, but I put him on the list and just have caution over him. But now, onto what I think is the spicy bit, is the forwards. So these are the forwards, the top assets, and the one essential one has to be Harry Kane. I know he's the most expensive player there, but obviously there's not many premium assets on the free hit. There's only 2, so you will easily be able to afford Harry Kane. I think he's probably the best captaincy option as well. The expected goals of Spurs haven't been the best, but as we know, if Spurs are going to score goals, Harry Kane is going to be at the heart of them. The fixture against Southampton as well, green on paper, but their expected goals conceded haven't been that high. I think Southampton will have potential to just shut up shop. So yeah, and Kane's expected stats there of goals aren't actually the highest on the list. So yeah, very interesting there. But I think Kane will definitely be the best captaincy pick. We know how good of a player he is, and he's absolutely essential to have in your team, regardless of whether you captain him or not. Now, getting onto the forwards, my second pick here, I've actually put Watkins. I think Watkins, the expected goals of Aston Villa aren't the best, but he's been raking in the goals recently. I think he's got 6 in 6 or something like that, 7 in 7, 6 in 7. Incredibly good stats, and Bournemouth have the worst goals conceded in the league. So yeah, the stats of Watkins are through the roof, despite the Aston Villa team not creating too much. He's been very clinical as of recent, so I think he's an absolutely solid pick there. In the front line, I think Kane and Watkins would be my nailed on 2 in a free hit. Tony as well, a very solid pick. We all know. I think those are definitively the top 3 picks there. The expected goals of Brentford are pretty decent, and the expected goals conceded of Leicester is very high. And Tony, obviously, the nice thing about Tony is that if he gets a penalty, you know he's going to score it, which is always a really nice thing. And I think Watkins is also on penalties. Those are all penalty takers there. Isak is someone I've put as well. The expected goals of Newcastle, as we discussed, is relatively high. And Isak has been putting up some incredibly good stats. He was really good last night against Wolves. So yeah, I think Isak is a really, really interesting differential if you want to go against one of Watkins or Tony there. And obviously getting onto the Chelsea front 2 there of Felix and Havertz. Felix has been putting up the better stats. I have put him above Havertz there, but Havertz is obviously on penalties and is looking quite a bit more involved in the attacking play. But I think Felix has been very unlucky to not get more goals. He's been looking very lively, but yeah, he's just not been quite putting the ball in the back of the net. I guess that's kind of been Chelsea's season. But yeah, if you think that the Everton game is going to be a high-scoring one, then maybe Felix or Havertz are the right picks for your team. There's not much to sway between the two. But yeah, I think that Watkins and Tony are probably better picks than them. But again, they are still very solid picks. They would be nice differentials on a free hit. But I think if you're gonna focus on Chelsea, I think the defense is where you're going to want to go. And Iheanacho as well, I've thrown in there, probably the 7th best one I've put there. His stats have been excellent. 0.47 expected goals, 0.37 expected assists. Very high, thanks to the brilliant chance creation of Maddison and the likes of Barnes and Tete. But yeah, the Leicester attack hasn't been great. The Brentford defence is all right. Again, if Iheanacho could... The thing is, though, he gets so many chances that he could get an absolute haul. The chances will be there for him. It's just whether he can finish them off. He's not as lethal of a finisher as some of the other ones on the list. But yeah, I think he's a very nice differential punt. But going on to the proper differentials, at the top of the list, I've actually put Gabriel Jesus. Now, obviously, he hasn't been playing in the last 10 game weeks, so the data I've taken has been the expected goals and assists over the whole season for him. And as you can see, his stats are through the roof. His expected goal involvement is actually over 1 per 90 minutes, which is absolutely insane. I wasn't going to use over the last 10 game weeks because obviously he came off the bench for 20 minutes in Arsenal's game yesterday. And yeah, I think because he had a couple shots, his expected goals was 3 because of such a short amount of time, over 90 minutes. It was insane. So obviously I'm not going to put that. This is a lot more reliable. He's a solid pick if he starts. But again, even if he comes on the bench for half an hour, 20 minutes, he could get you a goal. He's certainly he's going to be a pick that nobody has because he's only just come back from injury. And again, the fixture is so good on paper. Do you think that Arsenal are going to wrap up the game quickly? He comes on and Crystal Palace going to be very demoralised and he's going to grab a couple goals. Maybe I'm writing a narrative there, but I think Jesus is certainly an interesting pick. I think the only caveat is that he does take up an Arsenal spot, and I think I'd much rather go for 3 players who are much more likely to play. Wilson, again, a player who's been putting up very high stats, but again, is he going to play? Isak seems to be the preferred forward at Newcastle at the moment. They spent big money on him. He could play. They could play as a front 2. The fixture is incredibly good on paper, and I think if we get early team news, and Wilson is in the starting lineup, I don't mind going for an Isak and Wilson double up in the attack. But yeah, Wilson is a good pick and obviously a good switch to if we do get news that Isak is benched. Bamford as well, I think, is a viable option. The expected goals of Leeds haven't been great as of recent, but Bamford does look like he's getting back to the Bamford that we all remember. The injuries aren't quite plaguing him anymore. And yeah, Wolves haven't been the best defence as of recent. His stats are okay. They're relatively good as of recent, but yeah, I think he's certainly a viable pick. Johnson has been someone who's massively been overperforming. He is really returning his goals. Does seem to be like a clinical finisher. But again, Newcastle are a very, very strong defence. So he would be a nice differential on the free hit, but I think the fixture's a little bit tough. So I've put him in the viable category. And Solanke also, I think, is a viable option. The goals conceded of Aston Villa are very high, but the expected goals of Bournemouth are the second lowest in the league, only second to Wolves. So yeah, Solanke's stats are all right, and again, he's been getting into some good areas in recent weeks. He's a viable pick, but I think I'd be going away from him. And then two cautious picks there, Richarlison and Adams. Richarlison, certainly an interesting one. Still hasn't scored a goal in the Premier League this season. He has had two ruled out, but yeah, obviously those aren't on his stats for expected goals as they get ruled out. So yeah, maybe there's a chance for him to score big. I think he's being preferred at the moment in the front three of Kane, Richarlison, Son. I think Kulusevski, I don't know if he's been injured or something, but he hasn't been playing. He's been on the bench. But yeah, the stats aren't great for Richarlison. I would be very cautious of him. Certainly a mega punt there of a differential pick. I think there's much better, more nailed options on the free hit. And then Che Adams as well, I thought I'd throw in there just for if you wanted to go for the Southampton attack. He's probably your best pick. The expected goals of Southampton have been very low, and the expected goals conceded of Spurs are middle of the road, but his stats are also pretty low, so I would be cautious on him. But yeah, certainly a lot of picks there for you to digest. Again, feel free to pause throughout the video to look at the tables. But yeah, let's get on to some final thoughts. So just to wrap things up, my essential points on the free hit here. I think a free hit should be used when you have 6 or less players. I think 7 is when it starts to get a bit debatable, because if you've got 7 players, you could make a transfer to get it to 8, and then you might want to take a hit to get to 9, and then I think it's fine at that point. So it depends whether you want to use your transfers or not, basically. If you've got 2 free transfers and you have 7 players, taking a hit to get to 10 or using your free transfers to get 9, I think is perfectly viable. Again, there aren't too many standout picks in this game week. So as long as you have the likes of Kane, Tony potentially, Trippier, Saka, maybe a Nava Arsenal midfielder, and maybe one of the Arsenal defenders, a triple up on Arsenal. That's already 6 players there, and then you might have a 7th one as well who plays. I think you'd be perfectly fine to not use the free hit. I think the differentials, there's potential that they just blank anyway, and you don't want to take hits to get in someone who gets a blank when you could have just played a player who didn't have a fixture. So yeah. That's what I think about when you should free hit. Again, get your comments in the comment section below whether you are debating using it or not. I think the Chelsea and Newcastle defensive coverage is essential, having one of both of those defenses. I think a double up is certainly viable. I think a triple up might even be viable if you really, really want to go risky. You could even go for the triple Chelsea, triple Newcastle defense. Just have 6 of your spots. Really hope they get a clean sheet and just rake in those points, because if they do all keep a clean sheet, that's nearly 40 points there right off the bat, which is quite nice on a free hit. Triple Arsenal, I think, is essential. They are by far the best fixture in the free hit. A triple up in attack is definitely viable as well, because I think there are so many good options in the Arsenal attack. I just think that Crystal Palace's attack has been so weak. I think it's definitely worth picking one of the defenders just to get in, just to feel the joy with the clean sheet there. I think the clean sheet's quite likely. So yeah, I think a triple up on Arsenal is certainly essential. Aston Villa have the best fixture on paper. I think I'd like to have one player from them, whether that's a defender or a Watkins, or maybe one of the midfielders. I think I'd want to have one of their players in there somewhere. At least one of Watkins and Tony. I wouldn't say that either one of them are essential. I know that Tony's ownership is going to be through the roof because everyone got him in for the double game week in 27. But yeah, I think Watkins and Tony are. I would have at least one of them. I'd have 3 forwards. I'd definitely have a 3-4-3 formation, I think, and I'd go for Kane, Watkins or Tony, and then one other attacker as well. You could also just have both of Watkins and Tony, but again, there's some nice picks with Isak and Havertz, and João Felix are good picks. And you definitely won't use up all of your budget, so don't feel like you have to force it. The only premiums who are playing are Harry Kane and Heung-min Son. Heung-min Son is certainly a nice differential, but yeah, even if you pick those players and then pick the most expensive players, you won't use up all your budget unless you stack up the bench. Obviously, you want to make the bench as cheap as possible. Maybe have one really good asset at the front of your bench just in case one of your players doesn't play. It will allow you to take some more, pick some riskier players in terms of expected minutes. But yeah, don't feel like you have to force the budget and get in the likes of Richarlison, Jesus, just to try and use up all of the budget. And Harry Kane. Harry Kane is an absolute essential on the wildcard. He's the one player that if I looked on a free hit, if I saw your team and it didn't have Harry Kane in it, I would massively question why. I think he's definitely the highest potential player, probably the best captaincy pick. Again, you don't have to captain him, but I think you would definitely need to have him in your team on a free hit, especially gaining the ground on the people who potentially don't have him in the team. Maybe have a Haaland, but again, a lot of people I think will swap Haaland to Kane if they don't have Kane in their team already. But yeah, I hope you guys have enjoyed this video. It's certainly been a lengthy one. I hope you've enjoyed all the statistics there. I tried to present it in a way that's fair, and there's a lot of data over a large amount of game weeks. And yes, just try and suggest some interesting differentials for a free hit. I think that's what a free hit should be about, especially in a game week like this. You're not going to create a perfect team considering how many of the good teams are missing. I think it's definitely worth taking a punt on one differential, whether that be a Maddison, a Son, an Isak, a Havertz, one of those kind of players. I think it's definitely worth taking a punt on. But I hope you guys have enjoyed this video. Let me know if you want to see similar content to this kind of stuff as well. This is purely because I'm free hitting in 28, so I will share my final free hit team on my team selection video. So yeah, I hope you guys have enjoyed, and I'll see you in the next FPL video.